Before he became the suave and sophisticated James Bond, Sean Connery's life was anything but glamorous. His story didn't begin with tuxedos, martinis, and fast cars. It began in the gritty streets of Edinburgh, Scotland, where survival meant hard work and determination. Thomas Sean Connery was born on August 25, 1930, in the Fountain Bridge area of Edinburgh. His family was working class through and through. His father, Joseph Connery, was a factory worker and lorry driver, while his mother, Euphemia, worked as a cleaner. Money was scarce, and the Connery household knew the meaning of struggle. Sean often recalled that his family lived in a tiny tenement with no hot water and shared toilets. Growing up in poverty left a deep mark on him. It instilled both a toughness and a humility that would stay with him for life. As a child, Sean was nicknamed Tommy and quickly developed a reputation as independent and strong-willed. From an early age, he was forced to contribute to the family's income. By the age of 9, he was already delivering milk around Edinburgh. Later, he took on other jobs, including bricklaying, lifeguarding, and even polishing coffins. These jobs might seem ordinary, but they forged in him a relentless work ethic and a sense of reality that would shape the way he saw the world. Despite his rough surroundings, Connery possessed natural athleticism. As a teenager, he was tall, lean, and powerful. He joined the Royal Navy at just 16, eager to escape poverty and build a future. But his time in the Navy was cut short after 3 years when he was discharged due to stomach ulcers. This was a disappointment, but it also forced him to think about what came next. Back in Edinburgh, Sean found himself at a crossroads. He worked various manual labor jobs, but it was his physical presence that set him apart. Standing at 6'2" with striking good looks, he began bodybuilding. In 1950, he competed in the Mr. Universe contest, and, although he didn't win, the experience introduced him to the world of show business. It was during this time that Connery discovered acting almost by accident. While working backstage at a theater, he was offered a chance to audition for small roles. He soon joined local theater productions and began to develop a passion for performing. Though he had no formal training and was mocked for his thick Scottish accent, Sean was determined to succeed. His resilience caught the attention of casting directors. By the mid-1950s, he started landing small roles in British films and television shows. He appeared in movies like Lilacs in the Spring and No Road Back. These were hardly glamorous beginnings. Connery was often cast as a tough guy or an extra, but it gave him valuable experience in front of the camera. At this point, nobody could have imagined that this young Scotsman, from a poor background, would one day become an international superstar. Connery himself had doubts. He wasn't conventionally trained, he lacked connections, and his rugged style didn't immediately fit the mold of a leading man in British cinema. But he had something others didn't: charisma, determination, and an unmistakable screen presence. His big break came in 1958 when he landed a role in the Disney film Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Though the film was lighthearted and not a major success, it introduced him to American audiences and, importantly, showed producers that he could carry charm on screen. Around this time, Connery was still hustling to make ends meet, but his confidence as an actor was growing. What's often forgotten about the spirit of his life is just how much rejection Connery faced. Casting directors criticized his accent, told him he was too rough around the edges, and often pushed him aside in favor of more polished actors. But Sean refused to change who he was. Instead, he worked tirelessly to improve himself. He took elocution lessons to soften his Scottish brogue, studied acting techniques, and kept pushing until doors began to open. By the early 1960s, fate was about to intervene in a way that would change his life forever. Producers Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman were searching for an actor to play the lead in a new spy film based on the novels of Ian Fleming. The role was James Bond, a British secret agent with sophistication, style, and ruthlessness. Dozens of actors were considered, including Cary Grant and David Niven, but it was Sean Connery, rough, charismatic, and still relatively unknown, who caught their attention. At first, Ian Fleming himself was skeptical. He thought Connery was too rough to play the suave Bond he had written. But when Fleming saw Connery on screen, moving with a predator's grace and exuding raw masculinity, he changed his mind. Connery wasn't the Bond of the books. He was better. He redefined the character, adding an edge of danger and sex appeal that audiences instantly loved. In 1962, Dr. No was released, and the world was introduced to Sean Connery as James Bond. The film was a surprise hit, grossing over $59 million worldwide. More importantly, it made Connery a star. Practically overnight, he went from a struggling actor to one of the most recognizable faces in cinema. But before the fame, before the women swooned and the martinis were shaken, not stirred, Sean Connery was just a poor boy from Edinburgh fighting to escape poverty. His early years are often forgotten because his Bond persona loomed so large. Yet those humble beginnings were what gave Connery his grit, determination, and authenticity, qualities that made him perfect for the role of Bond. This was the start of an extraordinary journey. But as Sean would soon discover, fame and fortune came with a price. Being James Bond made him a global icon, but it also became a role he could never quite escape. When Dr. No premiered in 1962, audiences didn't just see a new movie, they witnessed the birth of a cultural phenomenon. Sean Connery, with his sharp tuxedo, calm demeanor, and dangerous charisma, redefined what it meant to be a movie hero. The line Bond, James Bond, became one of the most iconic introductions in cinema history, and Connery delivered it with effortless confidence. The success of Dr. No surprised even the filmmakers. Produced on a modest budget, the film quickly grew into an international hit. Moviegoers couldn't get enough of Connery's portrayal of the suave yet lethal secret agent. Suddenly, James Bond wasn't just a character. He was a global obsession. Connery returned as Bond in From Russia with Love 1963, and the franchise exploded in popularity. The movie was bigger, bolder, and packed with action sequences that thrilled audiences. Critics praised Connery's performance, calling him the perfect embodiment of Ian Fleming's spy. Women adored him, men wanted to be him, and the film industry took notice. But it was the third Bond film, Goldfinger 1964, that truly cemented Connery's place in cinematic history. With its gadgets, iconic villains, and unforgettable scenes, Goldfinger became a cultural landmark. It introduced audiences to the Aston Martin DB5, the now classic Bond car, and featured one of the most famous lines in the series. Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. Connery's Bond was charming, but he was also dangerous. Unlike the polished heroes of earlier decades, this was a man who could smile one moment and kill the next. His performance gave Bond an edge of realism that thrilled audiences. By the mid-1960s, Sean Connery wasn't just an actor anymore. He was a global superstar. The Bond franchise became a money-making machine. Thunderball 1965 grossed more than any Bond film up to that point, making Connery one of the highest-paid actors in the world. Suddenly, a man who once polished coffins and delivered milk was living in luxury. But with fame came pressure. The more successful the Bond films became, the more Connery felt trapped by the role. Everywhere he went, he was recognized as Bond. Fans expected him to act like the character in real life, blurring the line between actor and role. Connery began to feel that his true self was being swallowed by the global image of James Bond. Behind the scenes, Connery also clashed with producers Albert Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. He felt underpaid compared to the profits the Bond films were generating. While the franchise raked in millions, Connery believed his salary didn't reflect his true worth. Negotiations often turned tense, and Connery grew increasingly frustrated despite these tensions. He continued to deliver box office hits. You Only Live Twice 1967 was another smash success. But by now, Connery's patience was wearing thin. The constant media attention became suffocating. Paparazzi followed him everywhere, sometimes even into bathrooms. He couldn't escape the shadow of Bond, no matter how hard he tried. In interviews, Connery began to voice his dissatisfaction. He didn't want to be typecast forever as a secret agent. He wanted to explore other roles, prove his range, and challenge himself as an actor. But the public wasn't ready to let go of Bond, and neither were the producers. Finally, after You Only Live Twice, Connery decided to walk away from the role that had made him a legend. He was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. He told reporters he was done playing James Bond, a decision that shocked fans around the world. Yet, even after stepping away, Bond continued to haunt him. When George Lazenby briefly took over the role in On Her Majesty's Secret Service 1969, audiences were disappointed. The film didn't perform as well, and fans missed Connery's presence. Under pressure, the producers convinced Connery to return one more time in Diamonds Are Forever 1971. To lure him back, they offered him a record-breaking salary, $1.25 million, making him the highest-paid actor of his time. Connery donated much of that paycheck to a Scottish charity, proving he hadn't forgotten his humble roots. Although the film was financially successful, Connery's heart wasn't in it anymore. He delivered the performance, but he knew he couldn't keep being Bond forever. After Diamonds Are Forever, Connery swore he was truly finished with the franchise. Ironically, he would return yet again in 1983 for Never Say Never Again, a film not officially part of the Bond series. The title itself was a playful jab at Connery's earlier insistence that he would never play Bond again. While the movie drew audiences, it was clear Connery was older, wiser, and ready to move on. During the height of his Bond fame, Connery tried to branch out into other roles. He appeared in films like Marnie, 1964, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and The Hill, 1965, which showcased his dramatic range. But no matter what he did, audiences continued to see him as 007. This was the double-edged sword of Connery's career. On one hand, Bond had given him fame, fortune, and immortality. On the other, it became a cage that was difficult to escape. Connery often said he was grateful for the role, but resented the way it overshadowed everything else he did. By the 1970s, Connery was determined to reinvent himself. He deliberately chose roles that contrasted with Bond, gritty dramas, character pieces, and unexpected projects. He wanted the world to know he was more than just a tuxedo-wearing spy. And slowly, he succeeded. But before that reinvention, the years of being James Bond left lasting scars on Connery. Fame had lifted him out of poverty and made him a household name, but it also robbed him of privacy, peace of mind, and artistic freedom. For Sean Connery, James Bond was both a blessing and a curse, a role that defined him but also imprisoned him. When Sean Connery finally walked away from James Bond, many in Hollywood believed his career would fade. After all, how could anyone move beyond such a defining role? Connery himself wondered the same thing, but he was determined to prove that he was more than just 007. In the 1970s, Connery deliberately chose roles that were worlds apart from the suave tuxedo-wearing spy. He grew a beard, aged naturally, and embraced gritty, unconventional characters. He wanted audiences to forget the Martinis and Aston Martins and instead see him as a serious actor. One of his first steps in this new direction was Sidney Lumet's The Anderson Tapes, 1971. Here, Connery played a safecracker caught in a high-tech surveillance web. The role was raw, grounded, and far removed from the glossy world of Bond. It was a signal to Hollywood that Connery was ready to. He continued working with Lumet on films like The Offense 1973, where Connery portrayed a troubled police officer haunted by his own demons. The performance was dark, unsettling, and powerful, a far cry from the confident Bond audiences knew. Though the film didn't make big money, critics praised Connery's courage in tackling such a difficult role. Throughout the decade, Connery kept reinventing himself. In Zardoz 1974, he appeared in a bizarre, futuristic film wearing an infamous red costume that baffled audiences but proved Connery wasn't afraid of unusual projects. In The Man Who Would Be King 1975, directed by John Huston, Connery starred alongside Michael Caine in a sweeping adventure film that remains one of his most respected performances. The chemistry between the two actors was electric, and the movie showed Connery's ability to carry epic storytelling beyond Bond. But Hollywood wasn't always kind. Some of his choices failed at the box office, and critics sometimes questioned whether he could ever truly escape the shadow of '07. Yet Connery kept going, refusing to be boxed in. By the late 1970s, Connery found renewed success with films like A Bridge Too Far, 1977, a star-studded war epic where he held his own among Hollywood's biggest names. His natural authority and commanding presence made him stand out, even in ensemble casts. The 1980s marked a new golden chapter for Connery. Older now, with silver hair and a rugged face, he grew into roles that exuded wisdom, strength, and experience. Instead of fighting against aging, Connery embraced it, and audiences loved him even more for it. After decades of success, Sean Connery made a surprising decision in the early 2000s. At the height of his fame and influence, he stepped away from Hollywood entirely. While many actors struggle to let go of the spotlight, Connery chose a different path: peace, privacy, and a return to a quieter life. His final film, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, 2003, had been a difficult experience. Creative clashes with the director left Connery frustrated, and the movie's lukewarm reception didn't help. Tired of the chaos of Hollywood, he announced his retirement from acting. It was the end of an era. For fans, the news was bittersweet. Connery still had his signature charisma, that unmistakable voice, and the presence of a true star. But he had given so much to cinema already, and he felt it was time to live on his own terms. In retirement, Connery moved away from the constant flash of cameras. He split his time between his homes in the Bahamas, Spain, and occasionally Scotland. Always a proud Scotsman, Connery remained deeply connected to his heritage, often supporting causes related to Scottish culture and independence. Away from the cameras, Connery enjoyed a private, content life. He focused on his marriage to French painter Micheline Roquebrune, whom he had wed in 1975. Their bond remained strong until his passing, a rare example of lasting love in Hollywood. Micheline often described Connery as her best friend and partner, a man who, despite his fame, found joy in simple pleasures like painting, golfing, and spending time with family. Yet, even in retirement, Connery's legacy loomed large. Younger generations discovered his films, while older fans continued to celebrate him as the ultimate James Bond. He received numerous Lifetime Achievement Awards, and in 2000 Queen Elizabeth II knighted him for his services to film and drama. From a working-class kid in Scotland to a knight of the realm, it was a journey few could have imagined. But as the years went by, Connery's health began to decline. He lived quietly, out of the public eye, leading to speculation about his condition. Friends and family later revealed that he had been battling dementia in his final years, a cruel disease that slowly eroded his memory. For a man who had once commanded the screen with such sharp wit and presence, it was a painful struggle. Despite his illness, Connery remained surrounded by love. Micheline cared for him until the very end, and those close to him spoke of his dignity and warmth even in his last days. He passed away peacefully in his sleep on October 31, 2020, at the age of 90 at his home in the Bahamas. The news of his death sent shockwaves around the world. Fans, celebrities, and fellow actors poured out tributes. Daniel Craig, the Bond of a new generation, said, "Sir Sean Connery will be remembered as Bond and so much more. He defined an era and a style. For millions, Connery wasn't just the first Bond. He was the definitive Bond. The one who set the standard, the one against whom every other actor would be measured." But his career was so much more than tuxedos and spy gadgets. He had become an Oscar-winning actor, a Hollywood legend, and a cultural icon whose influence stretched across generations. Even in death, Connery's legacy endures. his films remain classics, studied and celebrated by new audiences. His performances in The Untouchables, Indiana Jones, and The Last Crusade, Highlander, and so many others continue to inspire actors and entertain fans worldwide. But beyond the roles, Connery's story is one of resilience. He never forgot his humble beginnings in Edinburgh, where he grew up poor and worked hard for everything he achieved. He carried that toughness with him into Hollywood, where he faced doubt, typecasting, and controversy, yet always emerged stronger. The forgotten life of Sean Connery lies not in his fame, but in the man behind the spotlight. He was fiercely private, sometimes stubborn, but always authentic. He lived life on his own terms, walking away when he wanted to, embracing roles that challenged him, and never letting Hollywood fully define who he was. Today, when audiences revisit Dr. No and hear those immortal words, Bond, James Bond, they're not just watching a spy movie. They're witnessing the moment a working-class kid from Scotland became a global legend. Sean Connery may be gone, but his presence remains alive in every frame of film, every generation of fans, and every actor who dares to step into the role of James Bond. He was the first, the original, and for many, still the greatest. And in the end, perhaps that's the truest measure of his legacy. Not just the roles he played, but the life he lived, one of ambition, transformation, and timeless impact. Sean Connery's story is far from forgotten. It lives on, as unforgettable as the man himself.